In the dim light of my study, I recall the exact moment when my life took a drastic turn. It was just another late evening, my trusted coffee cup in hand, and my mind whirred with the mundane cases that had filled my week. I never anticipated that a single phone call would plunge me into one of the most complex cases of my career. Detective Haider Graves? The voice on the other end was muffled, hinting at urgency and desperation. Yes, this is Haider. How can I help? My instincts kicked in immediately, the detective within me always awake, always alert. We need your expertise. It's about a murder. A high-profile one. Please, come to Oakridge Manor. Oakridge Manor. A name that resonated with both opulence and enigma. As I grabbed my coat, I felt an electric thrill coursing through my veins. Little did I know, this call would unravel a web of secrets, lies, and blood that would push my investigative skills to their limits. Upon arriving at the manor, I was greeted by the crisp night air and an eerie silence that enveloped the estate. The imposing structure loomed before me, its grandeur tainted by the recent tragedy. I stepped inside, met by the anxious faces of law enforcement officials and the victim's family, each lost in their own world of grief and suspicion. The victim, Richard Blackwood, a renowned businessman, was found dead in his study. The initial reports suggested suicide, but something gnawed at me, urging me to look deeper. I stood over Richard's lifeless body, the room thick with tension. My keen eyes scanned every detail, from the overturned chair to the half-drunk glass of whiskey on the desk. Why would a man like Richard commit suicide? I muttered under my breath. The questions flooded my mind. Detective Graves, said Officer Dunn, pulling me from my thoughts. The family is in the parlor. They're anxious to speak with you. I nodded, my resolve hardening. In these kinds of cases, families often held the key to unlocking the truth. I made my way to the parlor, where the Blackwood family sat in silence, a tableau of sorrow and disbelief. Richard's wife, Eleanor, was the first to speak. Detective, we believe he was murdered. There's no way he would have taken his own life. Her voice cracked, but the fire in her eyes suggested she was holding back more than just tears. You must find out who did this. I focused on the family dynamic, noting their body language. Eleanor's clenched fists, Richard's brother Paul, who shifted his weight uncomfortably, and their daughter, Lily, perched at the edge of her seat, eyes wide and searching. I'll need to ask some questions, I said. But first, can you tell me about Richard's life? Any enemies or issues I should be aware of? The discussion spiraled into a tangle of relatives and friendships, each revealing a little more about Richard's world. I noted discrepancies in their timelines and reactions, subtle hints of tension lurking beneath their grief. Every statement made led me closer to understanding the truth hidden within the shadows. As the days passed, I delved deeper into Richard's life. I uncovered financial discrepancies, a crumbling business, and whispers of betrayal among friends. Yet, the biggest lead surfaced when I gained access to Richard's private communications. One email stood out, a threatening message from an anonymous sender demanding money in exchange for silence regarding a dark secret. Wielding the challenge, I began to dig into Richard's past, exploring his associations and potential threats. Eleanor continued to insist that Richard was a good man, juggling ever-compounding stress from work and family. However, her emotional veneer seemed thin. The more I investigated, the clearer it became that she was hiding something. My instinct for logical reasoning kicked in. Why would an innocent man receive such threats? What secret was Eleanor so desperate to protect? Every interaction with her filled me with unease, as if the truth loomed just outside my grasp. Armed with my discoveries, I returned to Oakridge Manor to confront Eleanor. The tension in the air was palpable as I laid out my evidence before her. Eleanor, someone threatened Richard. You must know something. What was he involved in? I pressed. Her expression hardened, revealing a flicker of anger beneath her grief. He was under pressure. It doesn't mean he deserved to die. But did you think he was capable of taking his own life? I challenged, trying to gauge her reaction. Suddenly, she broke down, sobbing not just for her husband but seemingly for the weight of their shared secrets. In a moment of vulnerability, she confessed, he had an affair. I thought we could work through it, but the emails, I didn't think he'd go to anyone else. Her admission left me stunned, spinning intricate webs of deceit and betrayal in my mind. I needed to dig deeper, to follow the leads that this revelation opened. Richard's affair could lead to motives: jealousy, anger, retribution. As I explored Richard's affair, I came across a name: Julia Sinclair, an aspiring artist who had a tempestuous relationship with Richard. I found Julia in a local gallery, her demeanor calm yet cautious. "Detective Graves? What brings you here?" she asked, as if her eyes could read the motives behind my inquiries. I laid out my suspicions and her connection to Richard. "Did you know about the threats he received?" She looked at me, an eerie calmness washing over her. "He told me that he would handle it. He didn't want to involve me." Julia's alibi checked out, but my instincts told me there was more. I studied her closely, the way she squirmed when discussing her relationship with Richard, a concoction of passion and pain. It wasn't until later that I found the twist I least expected: a recorded conversation between Richard and Julia, where she expressed her disdain for Eleanor and spoke about wanting freedom from their affair. The tone shifted, morphing into something darker, something threatening. I gathered the family one last time, presenting what I had uncovered. It wasn't a straightforward case of betrayal. It was a collision of emotions. The threads were fraying around Eleanor's affair and the lies that masked the truth. It was time to pull back the curtain completely. I brought Eleanor and Paul together, revealing the affair and its implications, how it had created a tapestry of mistrust that culminated in Richard's death. I suspect it wasn't just the affair but a combination of desperation, anger, and fear, I stated. Someone didn't just act out of love, they acted from a place of rage. Shadows betray those who feel trapped. Then, I turned to Paul. "You saw your brother in pain, and jealousy brewed. Is that why you didn't speak up earlier?" His pallid expression told me everything I needed to know. From the very beginning, Paul had despised Richard for various reasons, including his achievements and the affection of Eleanor. In a shocking climax, the final confrontation came to light with Paul breaking under pressure, revealing his lifelong resentment toward his brother. In a moment of rage born from years of pent-up frustration and jealousy, he had confronted Richard, only for the argument to escalate tragically. "Why couldn't you just leave her alone?" Paul had shouted during a heated discussion, his voice echoing in the confines of the study, leading to an act of violence that neither brother foresaw. "Is this the legacy I am left with?" Eleanor shouted, her voice a cacophony of sorrow and fury as she realized what her husband had faced. She had lost them both. As I reflected on this case, it struck me: the darker the secrets, the more entangled the web. Just as light reveals shadows, the truth inevitably comes to light. Now, years later, I sit in my study as I recount this case, shadows long dissipated. I think of Richard, Eleanor, Julia, and Paul, all woven into a tapestry of tragedy. As a detective, my role isn't just about solving cases. It's about illuminating the hidden truths that fester in the dark. So, why do I continue to unravel such stories? Because within every case lies the potential to redeem lost lives, to bring clarity to chaos, and most importantly, to prevent others from falling into the shadows of deceit.